Good evening, everybody. Hello. Apologies for the slight delay on getting live. Oh, we've got Dean now. We've had a slight technical issue where Dean's not been quite able to get onto the stream, but I've just seen he's joined in now, so we can add him in. Hi, Dean.
Hey, how you doing? Sorry about that.
It's all right, no worries.
All day, and it just decided not to work all of a sudden.
It's how it happens, isn't it? It can happen like that. Yeah, technical issues. I suppose that's a.
It might be user error as well, so I can't.
Yeah, it's one of those things, I think, where there was a tasting we did back in July, the Black Top one, not Black Top, sorry, the 50th anniversary Black Top Day tasting, the rum one, and I came up to the new shop to get it all sorted. And then suddenly the internet had all gone down, wasn't working, had a mad rush back down to the other shop and managed to just get set up. So these things happen though, but yeah. Anyway, good evening, everyone.
Yeah, we're all learning to adapt. So.
Yeah. I hope everyone is well. Good evening, and hello to anybody that's watching it at a slightly later date, because I know that a few people are. So yeah, I hope you enjoy it. We've got some absolutely fantastic stuff lined up for this evening, which is going to be really, really exciting. And we've got Dean with us, who's going to talk through some of the great bits that we're tasting this evening. But yeah, I'll give everyone a couple of minutes to settle in, because we always like to just do that beforehand. And yeah, I hope everyone's good. So I'm really looking forward to some of these, which is good.
Yeah, really, really looking forward to this lineup. It's not often I get to the vintage.
Yeah, and we've got pretty much the whole range of Diplomatico today, which is really, which is good, because it's very rare as well that you get to taste through the sort of whole range, which unfortunately we'd usually have these open all as tasters and samples for everyone to come in and try, but obviously at the moment not so much. But we're still here, still open, so can't complain. But
yeah, that's one of the saviours that booze shops are considered, or they are essential.
I think there's quite a few people that would agree with that. They are essential. So it's been good to have, good to be open. And I believe, Dean, last time you were here, you were in the new shop before it had all the furniture in. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
I got a little sneak peek.
We're in it now. It's got all the furniture in, except it's got a lot of stuff around at the moment. So I'm not going to show everyone, because it's got lots of stuff to put on the system and things. But yeah, it is really nice.
It's looking good. Yeah, I had a nice little sneak peek. I think all that was there was a couple of bottles, like one shelves, and a big long table for everyone to sit around and sit.
Yeah. So it's all been done now. So eventually we'll get everyone here. So, do you have a little presentation to share, Dean? Was that?
Yeah. So I've got. Well, it could be a really in-depth presentation, but I don't like death by PowerPoint. So I'm just going to sort of cut in and cut out and just show you some various images, which I think gives you a real sense of sense of place of where it's made. So over in Venezuela, take you away to warmer climates.
Yes, that would be lovely, because it's been freezing today.
Yes.
Because we've been having to have the door open as well. I've been complaining all day about how cold it is. So apologise to anyone if they come in and they just hear me complaining about being cold. But are you able to share your screen okay? Or
yeah, well, I'll do a little test in that.
Because I've got another screen if it needs to be. And then I think we can get started. But,
perfect. Yes. Okay.
Excellent. So I think we should probably get started now. Obviously, many of you are familiar with me or the shop. If you're not familiar with us, hello and welcome to our tasting. Those that are, and there are a few people that have been on quite a few of the tastings. So hello to everybody and welcome. And I'll introduce Dean to you as well. Dean is from Specialty Brands, who we work quite closely with. And yeah, I'll let Dean introduce himself and tell us a little bit about his background as well.
Yeah, thanks. So Yeah, my name's Dean. I work with Specialty Brands. I've been with the company for about 2 years now, and I look after the ever-expanding rum portfolio. So I'm the rum ambassador, which is a lovely title to have, I'm not going to lie. And we've got huge, like about 5 or 6 rum brands from all across the Caribbean and South America, in Diplomatico's case. Love rum. It's always been my favourite spirit. Like most bartenders, well, not all, but a lot of bartenders, I started bartending when I was at university and never left. And really gravitated towards rum just because of its pure, like the pure diversity and sort of style, flavor profile, history, and if you ever get to visit a rum distillery, it's usually in a nice place. So
our like kind of rep is a guy called Sam who comes and visits us sometimes, and he often complains about you being able to go to the Caribbean. He's like, I never get to go to these places, as to which I like to reply to him, I'm like, yes, well, you get to go to Italy and other places as well. So,
yeah, he gets to go eat and drink his weight in wine and cheese over in
exactly.
So
yeah,
and that was only because my boss couldn't go. He still like a year and a half has passed, and he still hasn't given up that grudge.
You didn't mention that. You just said, "Oh, Dean gets to go to the Caribbean."
I did. I'm not lying. It was amazing. Yeah, it was a. My boss couldn't go, so they sent me instead. So it was like, oh yeah, it was amazing, don't get me wrong.
But yes, hopefully we can attempt to go to the Caribbean today.
Yeah, we're going to take you to former clients and show you some lovely pictures of the distillery, which is in a little village called La Miel, which is in Venezuela, north of Venezuela. Some nice pictures of that, and then we've got some lovely rums to sip along to as well. So, bit of escapism for tonight.
So, which would be the first rum we're going for? Is it the
Well, actually, we're going to go for the Mantuano first.
Mantuano, lovely. So this is this one.
Yep.
Excellent.
Have them all here, guys. So if you want to, I'm going to do a little introduction to rum in general and Venezuela and Diplomatico. But if you want to, just a little introduction to this one first. If you want to have a little pour, so you're not empty-handed while I'm waffling on the introduction. We can't have that. 7:30. This one, I'll do a little introduction. So this is the Diplomatico Mantuano, which means nobleman or gentleman. They didn't want to put an age statement because it's a blend of rums between, 50% of it's 8 years old and the rest is between 2 and 8. As we go through the rums, we'll talk about the differences and sort of the rules and regulations and how they're made a little bit more in depth. But in short, as to get you going, so you know what you're drinking, it's a blended rum. So Diplomatico actually make 3 different styles of rum. They make a heavy rum in a pot still, which is quite aromatic, full bodies and tropical. They make a rum, very light, sort of spicy rum in something called a barbette still, which is a column still from France. So quite light, quite elegant, quite dry. And they also make sort of a medium-bodied rum, which is from a batch kettle. We'll talk about those a bit more in depth, which is a bit more silky, a bit more rounded, and quite creamy in that kind of sense. Nice. So 40% is pot still, 40% is the creamy number, so it's quite a good body to it, and then it's got sort of spice to it as well. So it's all aged in ex-bourbon casks in Venezuela for 2 to 8 years. Just so you know what's going on. And it's our sort of go-to all-rounder rum, the Mantuano. Yeah. And the reason why they call it Mantuano means nobleman, which is the chap on the bottle here. As far as I know, he was kind of a local chap to La Miel called Don Juancho. And from what I've gathered and read, he was a bit of a Great Gatsby kind of character. Liked to travel a lot, liked to wine and dine his friends with quite an impressive rum and spirits collection. So they've named it after him. So a little introduction to Diplomatico. So it is based in Venezuela. So Venezuela, obviously a huge country, the north of South America, just north of the equator. So very tropical, very hot. Yeah. Perfect for growing sugarcane. So for those of you that don't know, I'm sure most of you do, but rum is made from sugarcane. Mm-hmm. So sugarcane is part of the grass family, so very similar to a bamboo in that kind of sense, but it's very tall in strands. And as soon as you chop it down, as you crush it, you extract what's called sugarcane juice. That is delicious. Have you ever seen people working on the plantations? Have you ever been to the Caribbean, India, or other places like that where you can see sugar plantations? You can just chew on it, just suck on the juice. It's delicious. But in moderation, because it is sugar, you do a lot of toothless people chewing on the cane. So you that you can make sugarcane juice from that. But what we actually use is called molasses and sugarcane honey, which is the processing part. So once you'd established sugarcane plantations in the 1700s in Venezuela, people, once they were processing their sugar, which means once you get your sugarcane juice, you'd crush it, crush the cane, reduce the juice, then you'd boil it down. And as you boil it down, you're concentrating it, evaporating all the water, and it starts to crystallize. And then it starts to turn a little bit brown and murky. And then what they do now is centrifuge it. That removes the sugar crystals. And then you're left with the black sticky treacle, which is called molasses. The first time you boil that, it's called sugarcane honey because it's not completely stripped out and processed yet. It's still got lots of aroma and flavors to it. Basically, what happened in Venezuela and all over the Caribbean is once people have processed their sugar, they were left over with lots of leftovers, molasses and things like that. So much like everywhere across the world, if you've got an excess of something with sugar in it, you'll end up turning it into alcohol and drinking it. It's no different with sugarcane and rums, essentially. So Venezuela have been distilling rums. Well, technically they weren't allowed to until about the 1790s, 1800s, because they were under the sort of Spanish crown. They were kind of banned for a while. It doesn't mean it didn't happen. It's just that it wasn't frowned upon if it was. So the Venezuela started producing rum more like the 1800s. So there was a small plantation, the early 1900s, which is where Diplomatico is kind of based around now. It's still a visitor centre, that little bit. But in 1759, so in the grand scheme of things, it's a very new distillery. A company called Seagram's. So if you hardened drinkers and booze buffs, Seagram's was a huge multinational conglomerate that owned the likes of Captain Morgan's. It was like Diageo pre-Diageo, that kind of size. They moved. They built a distillery, which is called Lusa. Basically, Licores Unidas company, and the sites that our distillery is, just because of the big oil boom, and it was the perfect place to grow sugarcane, essentially. So they started producing loads of different spirits, and actually introduced Diplomatico in 1989, and then in 2002, a local family called the Ballesteros family, who are Venezuelan. Jose Senior's still at the distillery pretty much every day. It's very much a family affair over there. They took over and started producing and focusing really on Diplomatico, expanding the range and bringing it to 95 countries now. So they imported the different stills, which we're trying the pot still later, so I'll talk about that, and started producing different styles of rum and really evolving the brand. And brought it to the UK about 12-ish years ago.
Okay. Dean, just a quick thing. We can't see any presentation or any images. Have you?
Oh, no, I'm not showing the images yet.
Oh, right, fair enough. I wasn't sure if you'd shared anything yet, and I was a bit confused. I thought I better just...
No. Thanks, heads up though. If that does happen, give me a...
But yeah.
Yeah, so we do actually have a picture now.
Am I right in thinking that the Diplomatico as well, they're a really green distillery, and they're really kind of focused on sustainability as well?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. Because they're very, very conscious of their local surroundings as well, because they are about, depending on traffic and road conditions, about 3 to 6 to 7 hours west of Caracas, which is the capital, out to Andes, which is the huge mountain range in South America, and very, very close to the Amazon. So they're very, very conscious about their local environment. And 100% of all their liquid waste, all of their sort of solid waste, all gets completely broken down and is recycled 100%. A lot of the sugar a lot of the waste from distillation gets cleaned up and used as fertilizers. A lot of the old sugarcane trash, the old cane, gets put down again as fertilizers in cane fields. Everything gets treated. In the last 10 years, they're using half the amount of water. They do lots of initiatives with local people, local sort of indigenous tribes, and lots of people that live, natives that live out in the Amazon. They work with different projects with those. They plant trees as part of DUSA, the larger company. So yeah, they're very, very mindful of what's going on. Jumping on a bandwagon, they've been doing it for years. So yeah, I can show you a picture of the distillery.
Yeah, I'll add that in there.
Here we go.
It's a really green land.
Yes, so all this around here is sugarcane. So they're surrounded by sugarcane. They're actually one of the few distilleries. Most of the Caribbean, their sugar they can't produce enough sugar and molasses for the rum output. So they have to import it, usually from like Nicaragua or somewhere like Guyana next door. But Venezuela, because they've got so much space, as you can see, they get all of their sugarcane. So we actually, it's all traceable from the field to the bottle, which is really quite rare, actually. So yeah, it doesn't look bad, does it? You see, you've got the mountain range. It's called the Planas Valley, where it's based. So all of the spring water comes down from the Andes into the valley. So it's all really clean, pristine, cleaned up water. Everything that goes into it. Mm. So, what do you think of the rum? I know.
I really like this. I mean, I like Diplomatico anyway, so maybe I'm slightly biased, but I do really like Mantuano because I find that some of the ones we're going to move on to, they can be quite kind of rich and like full on, but I think this is a really nice, slightly fresher version.
Yes, yeah, because sort of Latin American rums tend to be a little bit lighter. They tend to make the spirits quite elegant, and Diplomatico kind of buck that trend, but they can produce that. So this is what this one is. This one is like great and just with like some ginger ale or a spiced orange ginger ale or something like that. But also if you're having like friends around and you want to make a big punch, this is the one to go for. So as geeky in the cocktails as you wish. If you want to get tropical, get a bit tiki, bring out the tropical fruits, juices, and it all works very, very well with this.
It's got a really nice softness to it, but quite bright as well, which I think is really nice. It doesn't feel heavy or anything like that, but it's really very inviting. Like I've got to be careful because I've got to drive home later, so I've got my tune with me. But I keep going back to have another sip and another sip of it. So it's one of those that's just really, for me, I just think it's a lovely light sort of style of rum that's not. It's still got character to it. It's still got a nice character in it.
They don't make boring rums. They're like quite they're quite complex.
Yeah.
Although this one is on the lighter side of the sort of range, as we'll try. Even the Planas is slightly more full bodied, but this is their all rounder.
Yeah. And this I think is really good value for money. So it retails about £32 or so, something like that. Off the top of my head, and I think value for money wise it's fantastic because it's not one that you feel like you have to save for just a special occasion that you can only drink neat, or it's like, oh, I won't drink that now, it's only a Thursday night, where it's one of those rums that fits both of those occasions. So if you did want to drink it like that, you can get it's really delicious. But as you say, in cocktails and things as well, it works really well.
It's a good Thursday night rum. I'm not gonna
Thursday night, I mean, when we've been in lockdown, who knows what day it is, so it doesn't really matter, does it?
Yeah, I lose track of the days. This is my home office dinner table, so spending a lot of time here.
Yeah, I think quite a few people are in that position. I'm quite lucky; I get to still come to work, which is nice. So I get to leave my flat. But yeah, if anyone's got any comments as well, please feel free to add them onto the stream, so we'll get them on there, or you're welcome to email me over any comments. I've got the emails here or on Facebook or anything, so yeah, please do let me know. Let us know if there's anything that you want to ask at all or any comments. It's always great when we have people involved in it as well. So yeah,
when I've done this in the past, usually by the time we get to like rum 2 or 3, that's when the questions start to come in.
Usually it's a little bit different over this format, but it works for the time being. So
and I'm very happy we managed to. People are still interested, which is fantastic. And
this has been a popular one. Let's taste it, and you can see why. So yeah. Is there any particular cocktail that you'd recommend for this particular rum, for the Mantuano?
This one, I like sort of making sort of tiki style drinks with it. So there's something called a jungle bird.
Yes.
Basically, sugar, lime, rum, lime, and sugar is like the holy trinity for rum drinks. Yeah. It's the building blocks to so many, like the daiquiri, the mojito, Then if you add some pineapple juice and a bit of Campari, so you get that sort of bitter sweetness to it.
Yeah.
A little shake, big pineapple wedge, and an umbrella if you fancy. That works really, really nice. There's like a nice short tropical escapist drink from the 60s. That one.
I can imagine that working nicely in that, actually.
Yeah, it's really, really simple as well. So
I'm gonna have to try that.
Yeah, I'd recommend it. It's good.
I can imagine it working well in a rum punch as well. I've a few stories of my parents used to make a lot of rum punches when my sister and I were younger, and they used to have drink them very, very quickly, and then suddenly end up on the third jug, and then next day wonder why they felt so ill, and wonder why I work in the alcohol industry now. But yeah.
There's a little saying, little rhyme in the Caribbean for like your rum punches. It's like one part of sour, so 1 of sour, 2 of sweet, 3 of strong, 4 of weak, 5 the bit of spice to make it nice.
Yeah.
The spice being some nutmeg or some cinnamon, not chilies.
Yeah.
So if you follow that sort of 1 part, 2 part, 3 part, you can build yourself a nice, as small or as large as you like. It's a Thursday night size or a Saturday night size.
Or a lockdown size, who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah. So yeah, I do really like that. And a good value rum as well. Good.
Yeah.
Good. Rum.
Yeah, just with, as I say, just easy highballs. So a lot of people drink whiskey in highballs. So just spirit mixer, just like some ginger ale to add that sort of spiciness. Works really nice with the wedge of orange as well. If you've got in from work or feel a bit lazy and want something quite refreshing, that works
Lovely.
really nicely.
So
yeah, so shall we pop over to the Planas now?
Yes, I'm interested to try this one because I haven't actually tried it, which I know.
Yeah, so, of course, a lot of people, when they see that like a spirit is clear, and they immediately sort of put it down or don't give it a chance. So what I've done is, this is why we do it second. So usually when you do a tasting, you start with either the youngest or the clear spirit. So in its rawer sort of rawer element, but this is actually aged. So this is actually aged. 50% of this is 6 years old. So in ex-bourbon casks, it's 6 years old, and then the rest of it is again between 2 and 6. So with this one, the Planas, which is named after the valley that the distillery is found in, they wanted to, as I say, buck the trend and change people's preconceptions of what a clear white rum actually is, what it can taste like. Because I'm sure we've all had bad experiences, let's say when we were 18, raiding your parents' cupboards and things, and usually certain spirits, especially ones that are available at the supermarket. And the rums don't tend to be the most interesting, should we say. Some of them really, really are. So what Diplomatico, they do, because of their range of different distillates and rums they could produce, they didn't want to just make a sort of one-dimensional, quite plain white rum. Yeah. So they wanted to make something quite sippable actually on its own, but also be clear. So this is 50% of this is 6-year-old, like the heavy pot still rums. So that's where you get that sort of big banana note and that sort of nice sort of viscous oily note to it. And then I've got this is a pretty big presentation, so I'm just going to skip through for the good bits. And then the rest of it, well, the other 40% actually comes from a still from Canada. So in 1959, when the distillery was founded, imported lots of different stills, as I mentioned earlier. So one of them actually came from Canada. It's called a batch kettle. So it kind of looks like, let me just find a picture. Kind of looks like a child's drawing of a submarine. You'll see what I mean when I share it now. So it kind of looks like a big sort of cylindrical with kind of telescope coming off the edge as the line arm. You'll see what I mean now when I show it.
I've got a vision in my head of
here we go.
Yes, I see what you mean. It does look a little bit like a submarine that a child's drawn.
Yeah. No one believes me when I say it does. That's the first thing I thought. So this is the line arm here. So this actually came from making Crown Royal whiskey, which again used to be in the Seagram's portfolio. And I think it's the only one that actually makes rum. So it's huge. It's like 40,000 litres.
Wow.
The distillation run takes about 36 hours. It's comes off about 95%. And this is what we make from the sugarcane honeys. So sugarcane honey, as I mentioned, isn't processed as much. So it's got a much higher sugar concentration. So you can get a lot more flavour and a lot more aroma. And for the fermentation, they actually leave it for 48 hours. So you get a lot more flavour evolving. So this also gives a lot of body, a lot of texture, which is why if you sort of give this a nice little swill around, you can see the legs and sort of oily viscosity of it.
You can see that. You can see in the glass where the drops are on it.
Yeah.
It's got a really tropical nose. In comparison to the Mantuano, there's even the Mantuano, I said, is a fresh sort of style. When you go back to that, you can get all the kind of like the oak influences on that, but on this it's just really fresh, almost slightly grassy. And
yes, yeah, that would be from some of the younger rums as well. So Venezuela actually have their own denomination, so like a DOC, like you have some wines in Italy and some prosecco's will have DOCs. It basically governs where and how the products can be made, and it also gives it a sort of stamp of approval and quality of approval. So you can't have anyone else making knockoffs, essentially. So in Venezuela, you have to use 100% Venezuelan sugarcane, which we do. We grow it around the distillery. You can only bottle between 40 and 50%. So you won't see any overproof rums, but you won't see any cheeky 37.5 ones either. And the last one is you have to age the rum for a minimum of 2 years before it's called rum. Much like Scotch whiskey has to be aged for 4, this has to be aged for a minimum of 2. So all Venezuelan rums have to be aged. So's Bacardi. It's very similar in Puerto Rico. That has to be aged for 2 years. What they do with this, once they age, 50% in the pot still, and then the others 50%. Is aged for 2 and 6. And once they blend it together, they run it through charcoal. And as you run it through charcoal kind of cleans it up. It takes away the color, and it takes away those heavier kind of spicy, chocolatey, oaky notes. But what it leaves is like the big vanilla, the big coconut, and then you've got those nice sort of foam bananas, like the penny sweets. Remember those? They're probably not penny sweets anymore. It's probably about 5p.
See, it has got a little bit of like a chocolate note for me, but it's like a white chocolate sort of style on it. Whereas the Mantuano's got more kind of milky, rich, or like even dark chocolate on it, definitely. But I think that's really delicious. It is quite, again, it's quite light for me. And
yeah, this one's 47% as well, so it's on the higher strength that we do. It's actually the strongest we actually bottle at. So it's not often you see a sort of, unless you're going for like an overproof white rum.
Yeah.
So they wanted to produce something you can sip it with. So some of my friends, they freeze coconut water into big ice cubes and just kind of drink it with that. So as it dilutes, the coconut water comes through.
That's nice.
If not, because it's got those kind of, it does have slight chocolate mocha, sort of like more like sort of coffee bean kind of note to it as well. It works really well in like espresso martinis. Yeah, that works.
Well, I'm all for an espresso martini that's not a traditional espresso martini.
Yeah.
Start putting other stuff in it. I think they're great.
Well, rum and coffee come from very similar climates, similar places as well, so it just makes sense.
Yeah, works hand in hand. With this one being 47%, and the Mantuano was at 40%, are they chill filtered, or is chill filtering something that's done in rum? Is it as much of
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're all chill filtered because they don't want that sort of cloudiness coming over. So those that don't know, chill filter, there's lots of oils, lots of fats that are also in spirits, and sometimes when it's below like 46-47%, if the spirit gets cold, they kind of emerge and fall out, and you can see this sort of cloudy haze in it. So quite often people will reduce the temperature of the spirit and then put it through a fine mesh to remove those, so it's clear, crystal clear all the time. It's a big thing in whiskey not to, so I'd always say non-chill filtered. So you will find some rums that aren't chill filtered, but because Diplomatico, they want it crystal clean.
Do you feel like, does it have a similar kind of effect? I know like in whiskey, it's quite, it's one of those things that people are kind of very split on, and people are quite kind of like, no, you should, or yes, it's okay. Where I feel like in rum, it doesn't have quite the same sort of effect. Like it seems most of the rums that I can think of, and majority of the ones that we stock are all clear. Even when they're chilled down, or when it's really cold in the shop or the back cellar. So I'm assuming it's not something that's kind of widely disputed in rum. It's something that just kind of that people do.
It really depends which island or which country is producing. Because like whiskey, there's no sort of overall world governing where everyone makes everything the same. So Scotch, Irish, and American are all very, very different. Each island of the Caribbean has to be seen as a different producer. A lot of people will stick the Caribbean as just like, oh, it's Caribbean rum. But there's Latin spirits. There's the British influence. There's some Dutch islands, some French islands, and they all have their own sort of styles. Like a lot of the French islands, like Martinique, the agricoles, they won't chill filter.
Oh, okay.
It's just more of a stylistic and sort of cultural choice, really.
Okay.
These guys wanted to. So some in Jamaica, they won't. A lot of the Jamaican rums are seen as like the Scotch, the big heavy Islay style, big, very intense kind of flavors.
Some of them are funky as well, funky in flavor and kind of a little bit more unusual, I suppose. Where things I suppose like the Barbadian rums are much more delicate and much more kind of like elegant. So in that space, just wondered how it sort of.
Again, it's from island to island, distillery to distillery. I think they chill filter as well. I don't think the Caribbean leg of the journey on the ship's the problem. It's when it gets closer to Holland and the UK when it starts getting a bit cold.
That's probably To be fair, if they're drinking it in the Caribbean and in South America, it's probably not something that's too much of an issue in terms of drinking it. But especially in the UK where it's been only about 4 degrees today, or felt like that.
It's 2 down here. I'm in Reading, and it's like 2 degrees tonight. So
it's definitely winter.
It's definitely set in now. So I'm a big fan of this. I'd say we like to make sort of martini style drinks with it, like an espresso martini with a bit of coconut syrup, coconut sugar syrup, just a twist. It works really, really well.
I can imagine that in an espresso martini now. It sounds great. I think I might have to get some so I can make some myself.
The espresso martini. Do you know the story of where it came from? It was a bar in London, and a famous supermodel came in, and she asked for a drink to, excuse my language, wake her up and fuck her up. So supposedly Naomi Campbell. They whipped up a shot of espresso, some coffee liqueur, and some vodka, and there came the first espresso martini in the 80s. And it's a bit of a resurgence right now because everyone loves coffee. Yes,
everyone loves
morning, noon, and night.
We have some coffee liqueur open as samples. As I mentioned earlier, we usually have stuff open as samples. And unfortunately, we've had to take all of them back to the warehouse at the moment. However, we've decided to keep the coffee liqueur in the shop because when it comes to Christmas, we used to have it open as a sample, can give people some, but we end up so busy that we don't get a chance to go out and go and get coffee or go and get a tea or anything. So we just have, little tot of coffee liqueur. I know Jeff and Barry will not mind me saying, because they've seen me and Sarah do it before. So Jeff usually joins in as well, to be fair. It's not all glamorous, the job, though. Just so everybody realizes. I think sometimes people think, wow, you have a great job. You get to taste stuff all the time. It's not all glamour, but there is definitely perks to it. So.
Oh yeah, that's the bits that you shout about on Instagram. And the early morning and carrying in the deliveries kind of gets left in.
You just kind of leave that. Hence why I'm not showing everybody else the shop today. It was nice and tidy, but it's a little bit messy. But anyway, so if anyone has any favourites, let me know. I've got the Facebook as well if anyone wants to message on there. But I think.
I really hope that changed some people's minds because I know quite often when you start with a clear spirit, a lot of people are like, okay, cool. This is the cheap entry level. Let's get through this before we get to the good stuff. That's kind of a lot of, like, not everyone, don't get me wrong, but a few people they kind of think. So hopefully that changed a few people's preconceptions.
I suppose as well, people always end up, you come from like a gin or a vodka background, people will always go to white spirits, and people that are in a whiskey sort of background or prefer those heavier spirits will go for the heavier things as well. So it's always good to put, to kind of contrast them a little bit as well and have some different bits and pieces, because I think sometimes preconceptions can kind of stop people from exploring a little bit. And I can understand it completely, if you can't taste something and you can't be persuaded by your taste buds, it can be quite difficult to sort of commit to something that you're not entirely sure of and think, oh, well, a white rum, and don't usually go for that. I really like the big heavy ones, but yeah, it's lovely, the planner. An interesting sort of
rums for different occasions. That's why they've got a range.
Definitely, that's what you need. So.
That's your Friday night espresso martini rum. There you go. If you need a day or a time, that's the time.
A rum for each day. That's what it'll be.
Nice. So should we move on to the Reserva Exclusiva?
Yes.
This.
Oh, lovely.
This always used to be sort of the grand finale. This was where it started, so it's quite bizarre and quite a weird feeling to be doing this mid tasting now.
Yeah. I have to say, I think am I right in thinking this is the world's most awarded rum?
Yeah, it's the biggest sort of premium family-owned rum in Europe. So yes, it is won lots and lots of awards. This is where it all started with Diplomatico. So this was actually released in Venezuela back in 1989. And you think the 80s wasn't a great time for rum. Kind of the 60s and 70s was kind of I don't want to say the death of the cocktail, but it definitely, people stopped drinking sort of classics and started drinking woo-woos. And a lot more straws and sparklers started to go into drinks. The less booze, more sparkle. So for them to kind of, and a lot of the heavier rums kind of fell out of favor. Where you started seeing a lot of lighter rums come onto the market, which again, brilliant for making cocktails. But if you want to sip on something, you want something a bit more body, a bit more complexity. So for them to release this back in 1989 was quite a step forward for them, a bit of a gamble as well. So they started exporting it in 2006. And I think it came to the UK shortly afterwards, actually. So I've actually grown up knowing this one. So when I started bartending when I was 16 years ago, I came across this when it first came to the UK. So to be working with it now, I'm very familiar with this. I've had a fair few glasses before I started working with it. And it's really a rum that we, when I used to bartend as well, really got people into sipping and drinking rum. Because quite often, a lot of whiskey drinkers wouldn't consider rum a sort of sipping spirit. They kind of see the fun, the loud shirts and everything like that. But rum is as much of a good spirit as, some would say better, but others say as good as any other sort of aged spirit as well.
I think rum is a little bit, I guess, more approachable, I would say. My boyfriend it's an odd one. People ask me, why am I with him when I work in the wine industry, and he doesn't really like wine, but he's gone from not liking any spirits at all to liking gin, and then he's got on to rum and really likes rum now. But you still got to think about whiskey, where he just kind of is like, I just don't think I'm going to like it. So he won't kind of go for it. So I feel like rum is a little bit more of it's a little bit of an easier way into those heavier spirits, and to the idea of kind of drinking things as a sipping, as a sipping drink, as opposed to having it purely as a cocktail. I think because it works so well as both. It's definitely. I think from my experience, definitely feels like it's a little bit more approachable.
Yeah, especially this one. This is designed to be, it's like someone's described it as like a molasses cuddle. It's like it's rich, it's decadent, it's got lots of chocolate, coffee, mocha kind of flavors to it. I think on the nose, it's got like kind of I'm going to say creme brulee, but that kind of sort of custardy kind of caramelization.
Yeah, like the top of it.
Yeah. I don't make a habit of having much of it, but when I did have one about a year ago, it reminded me of this.
So when it's just got the flambe, the torch out, and they've flambé the top of it, that they do.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, again, not like I've had that often.
No, but when I have, I was like, it does remind me of Diplomatico. It hasn't been a lockdown. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a little bit of background how this is made. So this is 80% of the pot still rum. So sugarcane honey, which has been fermented for like 48 hours to really enhance and reveal those flavors, and then pot still, and then aged in American white oak and single malt casks for 12 years. And then the last 20%, sorry, is a blend of the other two stills, the barbette, so the lighter, spicier rums, and the batch kettle, which has those sort of creamier notes to it as well. They're in between 2 and 12. That's why you won't see an age statement, because these are blends.
Yeah.
Quite often you'd see quite a few people who put sort of big numbers to kind of lure people in, but they don't play that game. They want to be as transparent as possible.
Do you think that age statements are kind of important? I know particularly in whiskey, people will look at age statements of like, oh, that's a 15-year-old, that must be a better one than the 12-year-old. But obviously that's not always the case. As you said, there's kind of rums and whiskies and spirits for each occasion. Again, I suppose, do you find that the rum industry, they're a little less kind of concerned with an age statement and a little bit more geared to the idea of blending and kind of working that in and mastering the blend in a way?
I think at first, when you started seeing like Mount Gay, for example, they released their XO first, and a lot of people, especially in Europe, can relate to XO through cognacs and brandies. Others started using the sort of familiar age statements you'd find in whiskey, like 12, 15, 1. They seem to be the magic numbers. So people started introducing them, but because as people are going on, as things are evolving, some people love an age statement because they know exactly what they're getting. Like it's 12-year-old, it's 8, it's this, it's this, it's this. But quite often, well, the sort of, if you go back to sort of the Diplomatico, where the Raneros, the Ron, they're called Maestros Raneros, basically, master blenders. They are, from a lot of them, learn their trade through Cuba, and all about sort of Latin American is blending the old with the new, filtering, aging, and kind of all of that. So Diplomatico have really stayed through that sort of culture as well. But you are seeing a lot more aged, like non-age statement rums. That's a lot more transparency as well, rather than just like a shiny bottle and people being like, "Ooh, that's nice." A lot of people, that does help. Don't get me wrong. A lot of people want to know exactly how it's made. So Diplomatico are as transparent as possible. What goes in,
and the aging process is slightly different as well, I suppose, because when you're in Caribbean and the warmer climates, there's aging happens faster in a sense. So I suppose you think that this has got 12-year-old rum blended into it, but 12-year-old rum is probably the equivalent of, say, a 15-year-old whiskey in Scotland. So I think
it's a lot. Well, heat is like a catalyst. It speeds everything up. So you get a lot more flavor evolving in the cask. You get a lot more interaction with the cask as well. So the flavors are just evolving far quicker. Because Venezuela is just north of the equator. You get those kind of cold, short winter nights and the long summer days. It's kind of consistent all year round. Like 6 o'clock, well, like 6:30, it's done all year round. But that means it's going to be about 26 to 32 to 84 degrees with 90% humidity all year round as well. So hot, very humid. So they say the casks evolve mature like 2 to 3 times as fast. Which is great because you're getting a lot more flavor a lot quicker, but then you get a lot more evaporation. The Angels are a hell of a lot thirstier over so in Scotland, I know where I'm going when I go somewhere hot. So in Scotland, you're looking at about 1 to 2% evaporation per year, like called the Angel share. It's a nice little, quite poetic, as the share of the Angels every year. In Jamaica, because it's more, well, in Venezuela, it's about 8% per year. So after 12 years, you've lost about 50+% of your casks, which results in like a huge amount of concentration, but not a lot of liquid. And in Jamaica, they have a term for it. They call it the duppy, the devil. So it's just downright theft. It's not the tax of the Angels. It's just theft.
I see. That makes sense now. The duppy. I suppose it is really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the spirits stealing the rum, not just taking their share.
This one is one of my colleagues is watching, and she said this is one that it's always a favourite, and I know a lot of people really love the Diplomatico, the Res X, as we nickname it, But she said as well, it always always tastes of sort of Christmas. And when I just tasted it then, it reminded me slightly of like a PX sherry, of those kind of like raisiny, quite rich flavors, and like you said, the chocolate and the mocha and things like that in there. And I think we've suggested before putting it over like ice cream or something like that, which I think would be great. Or
oh yeah,
like it's a real kind of dessert rum.
Yeah, it is. Their sort of serve, go-to serve is just like a little bit of like dark chocolate, like 70%, 80%. A little nibble on that, so it's quite bitter, chocolatey, and then the sort of sweetness on this just goes. And also an Irish coffee. This works really well.
Oh yeah.
A bit of cream on top, some nutmeg, nice bit of coffee, some sugar.
Yeah, it's certainly a favorite. That one, and it's a really good go-to as well. Like it's one that I know Jeff and Barry have sold for a long time, and I used to work in a few other different places, and it's something that I've been familiar with as well. For the past 5 years, I've worked in the industry, and something that people have always loved. I think there's a reason why it's been really highly awarded, and people really like it. But again, it's very easy to drink. I'm having to stop myself from drinking too much of it.
Yeah, it is. It's so approachable. Yeah. Like when people say they don't, like when I have friends over, I'm like, oh, I'm not really into rum. Okay. Yeah. Yes, you are.
Try this one, see what you think. But yeah.
This is like the ultimate crowd pleaser. So if you're new to rum, or if you're quite an experienced rum spirits drinker, you'll end up coming back to it. It's great.
I think the thing with this one is it's almost a little bit dangerous because you forget it's 40% alcohol, and I feel like it's the type of thing that if sometimes people look for kind of a dessert wine or an after dinner drink, and they want something nice and rich and sweet, but they're not necessarily into fortified or dessert wines. I think this would do it's a really nice alternative if you want something to just finish like a meal off with, or in that sense as well. So again, it's still a relatively versatile rum. It's something that you can sit and drink. It does also work in cocktails as well, and I can imagine.
I've done a few cigar evenings as well, and it works wonderful. So it's got that sweetness when you go for like quite a heavy cigar. It just sort of balances out really nicely as well.
And if you've got any of the first one left, I've got the glass still. Kind of, you can smell the sort of difference in it as well, in the kind of richness in it. The Manzanilla smells kind of like candied fruits, and then this one smells like those kind of rich dried Christmas fruits, sort of like, things. Yeah,
sort of like cooked down stewed fruits. The Selection de Familia, which we're going to try in a couple, that's kind of that sort of fruity Christmas spicy, and kind of dialed up to 11.
Lovely. Just seen an email come through saying that they're really enjoying the Plana sipping rum, which is good. So yeah, there's a few people with a few different things. They're liking the idea of it as a sipping drink. Which I think you don't think of white rum really as a sipping drink, or even white spirits as a sipping drink. I think sometimes if we used to give samples out to people of, say, a gin, and it was neat, and they go, oh, that's not, I don't want to drink it neat, I'd want to put a tonic in it. But it's always a good way to drink it. Drinking things neat first, and then adding a mixer will always.
That's always what I recommend trying as well. Always try it first. I say the Planas as well works with like different tonics and sodas. That's the good thing about the gin boom, because there is so many new mixers that you can put with rum.
Yeah.
And use some of the lighter ones. It works fantastically. Like small rural ones go really well with it.
Yeah. Lovely.
Yeah.
So
now we're going to move on to the Distillery Collection number 3.
This one.
Yeah. So this is relatively new.
There's 3 different options as well. But we do all 3.
So the Distillery Collection was first launched about three years ago when they released Distillery Collection 1 and 2, and the number 3, which we're going to try now, is the pot still. So they wanted to because what's great about Diplomatico is many things, but as it's family owned, they can be quite dynamic and they actually listen. So they like to be up there, like sort of leading the way in some senses in the category, but also kind of listen and see where the rum market's going. And we were going around and we're telling people how the rum is made. We make these 3 distillates from the different stills and then we blend them. A lot of people are like, oh, what do they taste like? They want to know sort of the inner workings, the behind the curtains kind of Diplomatico. So they released about 3 years ago the 1 and 2, which is the barbette and the patch kettle. But I thought we'd include this because the reserve exclusive of the Resex is 80% pot still. The selection de familia is 90, and which we're trying next, and then the vintage, which we're going to finish on, is 100%. So I thought it'd be nice to sort of try like the big component of it. So this is 47%. Reserve exclusive. It does have a little bit of sugar added to it after distillation, after aging. I asked why they do that, and they just said, because we like it that way in Venezuela, and there's no rules against it in Venezuela, and they're quite open about it. They say it on the website and everything like that. And when they said, well, that's how we drink it in Venezuela, you can't really argue with that. I've never been to Venezuela. And,
do you find that people, if you sort of tell that to people, they kind of go a bit, oh, it's got added sugar in it or not?
Some people do. Some people, as I think, when you try sweet things for the first time, it's amazing. But as your evolves, as you get a bit older, a bit more experienced and sipping more things, maybe that sort of sweetness won't appeal to you as much. But we still get some people like, they're like, oh no, I couldn't possibly drink sugar. I should have. And then you see them like, it's just so delicious. So I think there's a lot more open. It's a lot more transparency about it nowadays. It's not like some people still treat it as like a dirty little secret. But Diplomatico are quite open about it. Yeah, that's where we make it because that's the way people like it.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit like sulfite addition in wine. I think people are a little bit more open about it now and say this is what we put in. And most of the people that are making rum, that are making these spirits and wines as well, that if they're adding it in, they're adding it in for a specific reason, not to just make it more sugary or anything like that. It does seem to make sense, but I just always find it interesting, whether you ever find people kind of get put off by the idea of like, oh, it's got extra sugar in, or
yeah, you do much like with the hardcore whiskey fans, like some fans won't drink anything that's not cask strength or is chill filtered or anything like that. You definitely do have that in the rum world, which is why, again, when we released this, we didn't add any sugar. So this one's aged for 8 years, 100% pot still, ex-bourbon casks, nothing added to it whatsoever, and at 47%, so it's at the higher end. So the pot still actually goes into the cask about 55%, so really, really low. So by the time it comes out, it would have lost probably about 4 or 5% of its ABV anyway, and then it's diluted to 47. This is kind of like makes up it's sort of like the DNA, big chunk of the DNA of the brand. So straight away you can pick up a lot of those bananas that you find in both the Planas and the Reserva Exclusiva.
It's got a real punch to it, this one. A kind of real power behind it.
It is an extra 7% to the Reserva Exclusiva. So guys, if you want to add a couple of drops of water to open it up a little bit, as long as you're enjoying it, that's the main thing.
Yeah, I think that as you say, it's got a higher amount of alcohol in there as well, but it is fuller in flavor, and whereas the Resex feels quite rich and luscious and almost like a little bit like syrupy. This doesn't have that same sort of body in that sense, but it feels like it's got a real kind of full on whack of flavor going on, like high flavor intensity, if I was to use the correct term.
I like whack of flavor. I think
somehow I don't think that works though for WST. I don't think they'd get away with that in an exam, but that's the thing. That's what I like to put. I like quotes that relate to things where it's like, wow, that tastes like apple crumble. That's what I remember it as. But yeah. Not that I taste apple crumble in this, by the way. That was slightly. I just.
Well, I do the same. I do the same. I was saying creme brulee at the last one.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Relate a lot of things to puddings for some reason. It's got some like nice sort of like grilled pineapples, of charred pineapple, like banana note to it. It's obviously lots of a little bit of oak spice as well from the ex-bourbon cask and the new American oak that's aged in.
Even though it is the pot still, it does still feel quite lively.
Yeah, all of their rums on the light side, or sort of elegant side.
Yeah.
They don't go full Jamaica. They don't go to the full extremes. They make really nicely well-balanced rums. Nothing wrong with the extremes. It's just not what Diplomatico do.
Yeah, it is. You can see how that influences the other rums in there as well. But yeah. I've just got an email come through that I know there's a few people watching kind of remotely, so they have a Zoom set up, and then they watch together. And apparently someone got some criticism for having PX sherry in the house when I compared the exclusiva to it, but he agrees with the idea of that it has the almost like sherry-like characteristic, the Res X, where this one, the pot still has that, I suppose, more traditional kind of, or more what you might think of in terms of rum flavor. For me, like I say, it's got the bananas and the grilled pineapple and the spice in there as well, and
still got a big whack of vanilla, sort of butterscotch.
Yeah.
As well. The bourbon casks.
But that's sort of slightly toffee-like flavor as well. The more I drink that, the more I like it.
It's got that kind of Moorishness because of the dry finish.
Yeah, I was about to say, considering that it's being pot still, obviously you get the biggest flavors from the pot still, but it does have still quite a dry finish, I suppose, in comparison to some of the others as well. It gives it that kind of mouth-watering effect where you kind of think, oh yeah, I'll just have a little bit more of that. Which, to be perfectly honest, all of them have been a bit like that, which is quite nice.
That's great feedback. That's great. That's what.
And then we haven't got the other two on here. There's the number 1 and the number 2 that you mentioned as well.
They're a great flight to sort of see sort of the DNA and the building blocks. But we used to be able to do that when we were doing a tasting of 6. We'd have the core range with the Plan Asta Mantuano and the Res X, and then we could do the 3 of the Distillery Collection. But because we put 2 more, we thought that an 8 rum tasting on a Thursday night would be potentially a bit much. So I wanted to pick one of them so you can sort of see the major building blocks, especially the way we're heading with the vintage at the end.
How do you find the number 1 and 2 compared to the number 3? Do they carry similar characteristics, or?
Yeah, the Barbette one is, because it's a column still, it's distilled up to like 95%. It's a single column of only 20 plates, so it still maintains a lot of flavour, but it's quite light, a lot lighter spirit, a lot more what you kind of associate with sort of Central South American Latin style rums. It's a lot drier, it's a lot spicier. It's still got those sort of nice tropical fruits, kind of quite tangy. Again, that one's aged for 6 years. Again, no sugar. And the Barbette, that's the Barbette. And then the batch kettle is a lot creamier. It's sort of creamy spice, sort of medium bodied. Again, sort of more buttery than tropical. It's good. And then when you've got all 3 of them, it's nice to sort of try and blend your own Diplomatico. Play blender.
How it goes, which actually is a really difficult task when you think about it. I think people look down a bit on blending and think, oh, blending, so blended whiskey is going to be average, or
it's hard to make. It's hard to make something once that tastes good, let alone cool. That tastes amazing. Do it again, but with different Yeah. Oh wow. Like that's the skill.
And consistently blending as well. That's also something I think people don't realize. I know there's a few rums out there that have they kind of undergo a finishing, or they're aged and they're finished in a different style of cask. Like the plantation range is all finished in ex-cognac casks and things like that. And I know that's something quite popular in whiskey. Do any of the Diplomatico rums, are they, as they're broken down? Obviously, the pot still number 3 is just the pot still rum, but with the core range, the Planas, the Mantuana, and Res X, do they get aged separately and then blended? Do they then get finished together, or is it just that they get blended at the end and then bottled and they're left to kind of settle a little bit before release? What's the sort of process for that?
So what we do is we age all of the different rums and the different stills separately. What is a little bit different actually, because if you go to most sort of rum distilleries in the Caribbean, all of the casks are kind of stood up and on pallets, like S4, like 5 tall. It's quite precarious actually when you're walking. You're like, there's no straps or anything. It's very high. But Diplomatico actually lay theirs on their bellies, so they have a lot more contact.
Yes.
I've got a picture. Lovely. So they can actually get to the bungs a lot easier and actually sample them and try them as they're evolving. Okay. So.
There we
go. Here's they're all in these big racks, all on their sides.
Yeah.
These are all a combination of ex-bourbon, new American oak, and also ex malt casks, single malt casks. So they're all aged separately, and then we'll blend them together, let them finish for 3 months to kind of let them marry and everything intertwine before, Planas then goes through filtration, or the others will get diluted and bottled as well. It's diluted slowly before bottling.
Yeah.
A nice little segue onto the Selection de Familia, which we're tasting next, because that actually features a nice finishing, and as does the 2005 vintage, which has a year in Oloroso cask.
Wow. I was going to ask, do you ever...
Lovely segue, by the
way. I'm a professional. Do you ever sort of look at different cask finishes? I know it's a big thing in the whiskey industry, and a lot of distilleries, they will have their usual cask finishes or their usual casks they use. They might use bourbon or virgin oak for certain things, and they'll use Oloroso sherry. But then there's a distillery like Tomatin, for example, have just released a Fino sherry cask finish, and obviously things like Springbank, they've got the Madeira cask. Filey Bay are experimenting with it, but yeah, I was just wondering if that kind of comes into play. Do you think, again, in the rum industry, they kind of, I suppose it will depend on island to island, distillery to distillery, but it seems like there's a little less sort of experimentation for and the kind of need for different sort of styles of casks with rum?
You're actually seeing a lot more in the last few years, actually. So rum,
okay,
if you go all the way back to the 1700s, before the bourbon industry took off, they were getting Madeiras, brandies, and everything sent over to the wealthy over in Barbados, Jamaica, and then they'd ship the rum back in that. So it was whatever was at hand. I think Barbados, for example, only started using American oak. They were using Canadian oak before that. And you're seeing a lot of distilleries in the likes of, let's say, Barbados, experimenting more with sort of Madeira casks, Sala casks, and things like that, port. Diplomatico, because of the link to Spain and sort of the heritage of Spanish culture that's there, and also you've got Jose Senior, Jose Ballesteros Senior, who lives in Venezuela, who's at the distillery pretty much every day, if not every week. You've got Jose Junior. He lives not too far from Jerez, so sherry country. So they've got that big sherry tie. Miguel, who is they do a company trip there every year with the European ambassadors. So there's a big tie to sort of Jerez and sherry. So they use a lot of Oloroso and PX as well. Yeah. But they haven't experimented yet. I'm not saying they will or they won't with any other casks as of yet.
Fair enough. I just wondered, I suppose with rum, it seems like the cask finish is less of the star of the show, if that makes sense. I know a lot of whiskies will put a lot of focus onto, you know, this is finished in this cask and this is what makes this one different. Whereas the rum, it seems to be a little bit more like that's not the thing to necessarily focus on. So it almost like they seamlessly blend it in a little bit more. But it's interesting to know. I didn't realize that, you know, some of them are experimenting as much as they were, and that they did in fact used to use things like Madeira casks. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it's starting to see a lot more experimentation. Yeah.
But yeah.
So where the beauty comes in. So this is brand new. We actually launched this in October. So early October this was launched. And at the moment it's only in, as far as I know, 4 countries. So the UK, France, because France, big consumers of good spirits in general, whether it be whiskey or rum, wine obviously, Czech Republic and Denmark.
Wow.
So they're like the major markets, major countries, Diplomatico fans essentially. So this is only going to be in independent retailers and sort of specialist bars. Exactly, independent specialists like yourselves, which is amazing. And they kind of, as Diplomatico, as the brand grows, they've really grown through sort of the independence and the relationships. And as Reserva Exclusiva gets more and more popular and starts going into bigger shops, they wanted to use this as like a thank you and sort of the next step, the next sort of evolution of the Reserva Exclusiva. This one's like the Reserva Exclusiva sort of grown up its older brother, essentially. So it's got half the amount of sugar than the Reserva Exclusiva, so it's a little bit drier, quite a lot drier. It's an extra 3% ABV, so it's 43. And it utilizes a lot more casks in sort of the maturation in the blend as well. So Selection de Familia, mainly because the family were directly involved in selecting the casks and the profile in this. They very closely with the two master blenders, the Veneros, the masters, Nelson and Tito, who've both been with the company for like 40 and 30 years. So it's very much a family affair. Like they've been there for a while.
They know exactly what they're doing.
they know their way around a barrel. Yeah. So this one they wanted to use, again, it's 90% of the pot still, so it's slightly heavier, more robust rums than only 5% of each of the other two, so the lighter Barbette and the lighter Batch Kettle. But then this is where the maturation, because the vintage that we're going to try next, they get casks directly from Jerez, so they use Oloroso, but they only use it for 1 year. To reuse those casks, we've started aging rum for a lot longer in them. So this isn't just a finish.
Yeah.
So 90% of this is 12 years old, and the rest is 2 and 12. Probably on the higher end, but again, 2 to 12, there's no age statement. Not trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. And they use, again, ex-bourbon, fresh American oak, which they get from a broker, ex-single malt casks, as well as PX and Oloroso casks as well. I don't know the exact ratio, so they wouldn't tell me.
This is absolutely delicious, this one.
Yeah, so straight on the nose, you get those sort of red currants, those kind of sort of beautiful sort of oxidized, fruity, nutty flavor that you get from Oloroso sherry, like a dry, sweet kind of balance.
I was going to say, you can certainly detect like the kind of the sherry influence on that. I mean, this is very, very, very delicious. This is my favorite. Try it a few weeks back. It was a month, and we were all like, "Yes, this is great." I think Jeff was like, "We're gonna try and sell a lot of that at Christmas." So I apologize if that someone comes in and they're like, "Oh, I want a rum," and this is the first one we go to. But this is, hopefully everyone can taste as well that this, why this is delicious. And when you say it's like the grown-up brother or the big brother of the Res X, you can kind of certainly see that. It seems like it's a little bit more, I guess, a little bit more mature, and it's a little bit more held back. It's got that nice balance between dryness and the sweetness in there as well, which I think will appeal to quite a lot of people.
Yeah, we find a lot of people, a lot of whiskey drinkers that might find the Reserva Exclusiva that tad too sweet. Love this. It's got that nice balance, as you say, of sort of sweet and dry, spiciness. It's still got like this sort of dark chocolate spiciness that you get in the Reserva Exclusiva. This is kind of dialed up to 11.
It's also still got loads of tropical fruit.
It's got all of the DNA of the Reserva Exclusiva, but yeah, it's just got that sort of dryness, and that's just sort of next level of complexity.
Mm. Oh, that's really delicious. I told you there's some good rums on this tonight. Yeah, and price-wise as well, I think it's about $49.95, about £50 or so. Might be a little bit more than that, but off the top of my head, that's roughly where it sits, which is again really good value for money.
Yeah, it's usually around £10 more than Exclusiva.
I think one thing you do tend to find with the Diplomatico range is that they are really good value for money. Like the Res X is about 40 quid, about 42.95. I think we retail it at, and you're certainly getting a really good rum for your money.
That's the thing about rum; you do get good bang for buck. You really do. Yeah. Like, considering the majority, like 90% of this has been aged for 12 years.
Yeah.
12 years, you've lost 55 to 60% of your barrels.
Yeah, you've not got much in there now. So.
Yeah, and things have been maturing a lot faster. You get a lot of flavour for a good bang, good buck.
So with things like this, would you recommend drinking it neat as well as a sipping rum, or?
I'd recommend either neat or something like an old fashioned. If you're going to sort of just a couple ingredients, some bitters, maybe a bit of sugar, stirred with a bit of orange. That works really nicely. Would work quite nice with a clementine sort of zest, if thinking of Christmas and all.
Yeah,
that works. Sort of like stirred down on the boozier side of drinks, like Manhattans and like sort of anything you'd recommend putting like a whiskey in it.
Yes. something big and boozy.
Yeah. So it's the star of the show. You don't want to add too many juices and things to it. Yeah, so that's brand new, hot off the press. It's been in the UK now for about just under 2 months.
Does anyone else think this is their favourite? Let me know. I think I might be the only person so far that thinks it's his favourite. Number 3 seems to be the favourite, which is the Res X, but I did think that would be the case.
9 times out of 10 in a tasting, it usually is.
We've done it several times on tasting, and it's always the one that people are like, "Yeah, this is great." But then
when you try it, you completely understand that. Though you're like, "Yeah, I can see why this is everyone's favorite."
But I do find as well sometimes people will go for it, they'll try it, and they'll be like, "Yeah, this is great." They'll have it, and then they'll come back and be like, "I've had that already. I want something different but similar." And that's why this comes in really well, because it is different but still similar. Yeah. And I think I think people kind of overlook rum a little bit for being just one category of, you said about earlier about people think of the Caribbean rum being Caribbean rum. But as you mentioned, there's so many different islands and different styles, and, with that right down on the north of South America here, which is still quite a distance from the Caribbean. There's a different influence and things like that. And, again, you've got slightly different climates, even though it is a warmer climate, you've got slightly different styles of climates and slightly different ways of making it. I know in places like Martinique, they don't use molasses, do they? They use the sugar.
Yeah, they use sugarcane juice, so fresh juice. It tastes like really raw, really like super fresh. It tastes like ripping into the sugarcane, like with your teeth.
So I think when people sort of have a bit of an opinion, like, oh, I've had this rum from here, I want something similar, thinking kind of everything sort of sits in the same kind of threshold, but
I always say to whenever I'm doing a training session with bartenders or I always say find out where it's from first and foremost. Obviously, traceability is important, and one, how it's made. Like, is it a very light style rum? Is it a big, heavy pot still rum? So you can kind of gauge whether it's going to be light and floral and elegant, or quite heavy and viscous, like a Reserva Exclusiva, and where it's been and how long it's been aged for, and where it's been aged. So if it's been aged in the Caribbean, you'll get all those tropical fruits, a lot of tropical intensity and vibrancy. If it's aged in Europe, like quite a few because the rum world's slightly different to the whiskey world in terms of sort of like independent bottlers.
Yes.
So if you want to start up your own whiskey brand and you want to bottle your own, do your own blends, you can. There's some brokers, or if you've got a good relationship, you can go straight to the distilleries and buy single casks and be able to release them. The Caribbean, it's a lot more difficult to do that.
Yeah.
So most people will go through a sort of a broker, which is based in Amsterdam. So a lot of the rums are aged, which is a very sort of old school thing, the way to do it. So a lot of rums will be actually aged in Europe. So obviously, Europe and the Caribbean, very, very different. I'm not saying whatever one's better, but they're going to result in something that tastes so different.
Yeah, definitely. Just sort of, as you're just touching on that, I know there was in Barbados they were looking at maybe getting the law changed so that they couldn't legally call it a Barbados rum or something along those lines if it got taken out of Barbados, because I think they were sort of arguing that taking it from there and aging it somewhere else, you're taking it away from Barbados and things like that. So it's a little bit more, I suppose, a controversial.
Yeah, well,
I guess
it was more of a sort of British colonial thing. Was the distillers were out there, they would distill it, and then the skill was back home with the cognac and the whiskey blenders. It's only a really recent thing in the last 50, 60 years that brands have actually started releasing, like distilleries have started releasing their own brands.
Yeah.
Whereas they would just make rum, sell it to Europe or their local market. So Venezuela, they've got their DOC, so they've got their denomination, which governs how they make their rums. Some islands don't have that. Barbados are trying to put in a geographical indicator, very similar at the moment, which means it has to be made 100% on the island.
Yeah.
And if it's the island, you have to state. You can't say products Barbados anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a big debate on the island at the moment.
Yes, and I know there's a few brands not particularly happy about that. But,
yes,
it's not.
It's a bit of a clash.
Yeah.
We're going to mention no names, but there's a lot of butting.
No names. So far, there's been a couple of people. There's been about four or five people that have all said that this is the best so far, which I'm really glad.
Yeah, I've got 3 on the comments as well. Just said.
I'm really, really glad that people really like that. Something a little bit. I don't want to say sort of special as such, but it's certainly something that I think, the Res X is great. It's familiar. It's great. If you're looking to buy some rum and they're not massively into it, and that's a great place to start. But if you are a little bit more into your rum and you think, I've had the Res X, so I know what that's like. I'm a bit too familiar with it. I've perhaps grown out of it a little bit. I think that's a really nice step into something a little bit more mature without kind of going right to the full kind of vintage like we're going to next. But
It kind of bridges the sort of sits nicely in the middle, bridges the gap between the receiver and the vintages. Definitely.
So
really happy to get this out. It's a really satisfying cork as well.
Unfortunately, because we gave it all to everyone here, this is a lovely box that it comes in. My bottle is completely empty. However, I do have a little vial of it here, so I do have some to taste, which is great. But yeah, the bottle itself is completely empty, but it's a lovely, lovely bottle. I'm very excited to try this as well.
So we only get 1,000 bottles into the UK every year of this, so it's like a really limited release. Well, the diplomatic sort of stuff is very, very limited. So vintage, I think the first one was 1999. I might be mistaken, but it was around then. 98, 99. So the vintage states for the year that the sugarcane was harvested.
Okay.
And the year that it was distilled. So all of our sugarcane plantations come in. There's loads of them. They come. They sort of spread around. So all of our sugarcane comes from. So I've got questions coming saying, having had the 2001, 2, and 2004, can I talk about the differences? I haven't tried the 2002. I've tried the 2004. This one I think is a little bit nuttier. It's got a bit more of those red fruits to it, like the sherry casks. I think the 2004 was a little bit sweeter as far as I remember. I've been working with Diplomatico now. Well, I've known the brand for a very long time. I've been working with it for about 2 years, but it's only in the last sort of 6 months. So I haven't had the privilege of trying all of the rare vintages. But this one is slightly drier and more of those sort of red fruits and slightly nuttier. Sort of that nice sort of dried.
Slightly nuttier. It reminded me slightly of like an Oloroso sherry, where it's got that slightly yeasty character to it as well.
Yeah.
It's definitely got that, and that like nuttiness, that candied nut style, and really, really interesting.
So this is 100% pot still rum from distilled. It was distilled and put into cask in 2005, 12 years, and then it's taken out and put into Oloroso casks. So casks direct from Jerez in Spain, and then we age for a full year. So it's a full year finish, not like a 3 month or 6.
Yeah.
The full year in Venezuela, which is, well, I was going to say, it's hot. A lot of influence, very quickly. Yeah.
Do each of the vintages undergo the same sort of process as well, or does it change from kind of year to year depending on what the sugarcane and the molasses is like?
They'll go through the same process. The thing with molasses, it's all fairly consistent. It's because it's been processed. There's not much of the sort of terroir, if you like, left in it. Whereas if it were direct sugarcane, there's slightly more. Like sugarcane honey kind of sits in the middle of sugarcane juice, and molasses closer to molasses. So it's got all of that sort of sugarcane character, a juicy character to it, a bit more aromatic, a bit fresher, a bit grassier. But it's more about the cask selection, really. So they'll set aside casks that they think they will go perfect for the different vintages in the finish. And because it's a lot of, I think there's 12,000 bottles globally.
Yeah.
Per year. And bear in mind, we're in 95 markets. We spread them out to the main ones.
It's delicious. Well, that's really lovely that the gent that said about the different vintages. We bought it for the 2001 for his wedding, 2002 for Quinn's birth, and then bought the 2004 for their 21st birthday, or in anticipation of. He said, "This is so lovely, I may have to buy it."
Oh, amazing!
It is, yeah. You need one for yourself as well. You can give one.
Yeah, giving them all away.
When they so you can have it when they turn 21. But no, it's lovely. I think the sherry influence is really quite prominent on it.
Yeah.
For me particularly. I almost don't want to spit it out, but I have to be sensible.
Can't get the taxi done.
This one, so this retails about £100. So it is obviously at the more top end budget. However, I will say, even though it's more top end, I do feel like you're still getting good value for money. You know, when you think about some of the whiskey, again, going back to the whiskey industry, when you think about some of the whiskeys that are, we're in 2020 now, so that are 15 years old, some of them can start to get up to that price quite easily, or you can get up to that kind of higher margin, especially if they're experimenting with cask finishes and things like that. And I think, when you put it into perspective, that aging in the Caribbean does essentially mean longer than it would do if we were in a cooler climate. You are getting still some really lovely, fantastic stuff.
Yeah. Builds up those complexities and flavors a lot quicker. Yeah. Really does, and they become quite collectible. I saw 2001 on someone had bought it in a shop, obviously about 4 or 5 years ago, and they on an auction website for £500. So they.
Wow, do you find?
I'm drinking them, in all honesty, but
I think collectability is one of those things. I suppose the whiskey industry is again quite famed for, certain distilleries and things like that, which. Like, for example, Springbank, as soon as we get a release from that, we get a flurry of people being like,
can I have a case?
Most recent one was the Ardamurchan one, and people going, "Oh, you're getting a single cask?" No, sorry. But rum doesn't. I think rum, you don't always get the same. Again, you don't always get the same audience that are like, wow, I need to get hold of that. But rum is incredibly collectible. In fact, in this cabinet behind here, this top shelf is all rum up here. So you do get those sort of collectible rums. And I think sometimes as well, you can, if you are interested in collecting as well, I think you can probably pick up rums that are slightly easier, that are collectible, and not have the same sort of stress and want that everybody else goes through of like, there's a new release, I must get hold of it. And then everything able to get ringing up around and things like that. So yeah, there's people coming through with comments saying how incredible the sherry is.
That's really good to see. I'm glad you're all enjoying this. I say we don't often get the vintage out because we don't get a lot of sampling stock. So when Sam and Hannah arranged this, I was very happy.
Well, originally we generally do five spirits on a tasting. However, I think Dean, you said let's do 6. So I was like, yeah, okay. And when you said about the vintage, I was like, great, I'm happy with that. Do that.
None.
So yeah, it's always nice to have that. Yes. And,
I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I am.
I really want to just drink more of it, but I'll still say
vial home.
I have saved myself a little bit, so I'm gonna enjoy that later when I get home. So, but yeah, which has been the favourite of everybody's? I'm assuming that so far the Famille is probably up top, but then this seems to have certainly piqued the interest of a couple of people as well. So,
judging by some of the comments,
yeah, I think it's sort of the favourite. But I think it's a really nice range to go through, the Diplomatico range, because it's quite a varied range. You start with the Mantuano, which is that lovely sort of fresher style, but still quite kind of flavorful, and you go through, and there is, I suppose, without sounding so cliche, there is something for everybody in this range, which is good. We've just had another message about the Claren.
About Claren, yeah. They do a competition. This year has scarpered a few of the plans that we did have. Every year, so for those who don't know, Claren is a kind of an ancestral spirit from Haiti. So very much like the mezcal of the rum world, made in tiny little villages by the farmers, essentially. We do a competition every year with bartenders, and each bartender, I think 9 different countries went. But for the last 2 years, the person that's represented the UK, they select a cask. Everyone gets to select a cask that gets sold in their country. For the past 2 years, the past 2 winners have left the UK. So Adrian went to Spain to open up his own bar, and Margot moved back to Paris. So their single casks went with them. So we didn't get any, unfortunately. We were supposed to get some this year, but the world turned upside down. So hopefully next year.
Fingers crossed, yeah.
Hopefully whoever wins the competition stays in the UK.
That's a very good point. They're a really interesting style of rum and rum agricole, which is always worth trying. I mean, we've got quite a range of rum, and I think people last year, I remember at Christmas, people being like, oh, gin's massive, etc. But they're like, oh, but isn't rum going to be the next big thing, or is it tequila? And I don't think it's going to have quite the same pop as gin did, but rum is certainly on the up, I think.
I think well, because gin it's a very quick turnaround. As soon as you sort of master your sort of botanical blend and your sort of profile, you can turn it out within like a day if you're quick, a week or 2 or a month from start to finish. Obviously, a lot of these have sat in cask for 12 years.
Yes.
So I think rum's you're kind of getting two different audiences. You're getting a lot of the gin fans coming over to rum via sort of spiced rum and flavored rums.
Yeah.
I imagine you're seeing quite a lot of people ask for that, and you're getting a lot of interested people that rums tweak the interest of like whiskey and bourbon drinkers as well. And they're coming over, so we're kind of getting rum drawing in an audience from two ways. So with these, we're definitely getting more sort of the whiskey drinker, and the people of it.
Yeah.
They're interested from there.
I still think there's a good range, especially a good range. It's always good to sort of start people off on. I think sometimes if you gave somebody like a big Jamaican rum, like I don't know, Hampton Overproof or something like that, you're probably going to put people off if they've not drunk much of it before, because it is so kind of full on.
It's like, you wouldn't give someone a Lefroy as their first whiskey. No, it's kind of the same principle, isn't it?
Whereas these are those kind of slightly softer styles that go, okay, well, let me introduce you, let me show you what rum can do. And even so, there is a range that shows exactly different characteristics of rum as well, which is always good. So there's a few people that have come in with suggestions of sort of favorites. I think a lot of people have really enjoyed this one, the Famille, which is fantastic news. But they're saying that this is a close second.
Nice.
I suppose price, you are looking at double the price for this one. But as where we said the Mantuan is a great Thursday night rum, this is probably your special occasion rum, as was mentioned earlier. So I think my personal favorite. Probably no. This is what happens when people ask me in work. They go, "What's your favorite?" I'm like, "That's like asking, what's my favorite child?" I don't have children, but that's what I imagine it being like. Being like, choose between your favorite children. I'm like, I can't. Probably the 2005. I'd be lying to myself if I said the Famille was my absolute favorite. I think that is, but I do think the Famille is really good. I think that's probably my second.
Yeah. I think they work well, like from one to the other. It's really, as I say, it sits beautifully in the middle of the sort of core. And
we have had someone mention that this one was their favorite, which is really interesting. I think Samara, who's mentioned that, I know they've been to quite a few tastings and they've done quite a few of the whiskey tastings. So it's interesting to see how perhaps different palates will prefer different sort of styles. But the pot number 3, the pot still one with the lovely dry finish is one I think that if you are definitely into your whiskey or you've come from that background, it's certainly a really nice place to go to.
It's also good for like sort of die-hard Diplomatico fans that followed it from the beginning to kind of want to know a little bit more. They want to taste like the pre-blend essentially.
And bring it on. Question: are there any plans for a single cask release?
Not as far as I know. No, they've spent the last couple of years with the selection of the Familia. So it will take them a while before they do something like that. You're not the first person to ask.
And
I'm actually on a call with the European ambassador next week, so I will ask him as well.
What's happening with that? See if they've got any plans for that. But as you say, I'm sure it'll take a little while for that to come out into the market, particularly with COVID.
As soon as anything happens like that, you guys.
How do you know how the distillery have coped through obviously everything going on through COVID? Have they seen? I know that it seems like a lot of brands have, or a lot of alcohol brands have actually done pretty well. I think there's some quite big budget adverts gone out on a UK TV recently. I'm just wondering how things been for them. Have they found it sort of okay?
In Venezuela, they really do look after their like first and foremost, they've been looking after their team. They've donated like over 60,000 liters of alcohol to be put into sanitizers to work with the local communities. They're just taking things very seriously. Which is good, because I've seen not much about Venezuela in general on the news, but you can see like Peru and other places have been sort of had a really hard time. I don't think Venezuela has quite as much of a bad time, but the distillery are making sure that everyone that works there is really looked after, taking things very seriously, and donating lots of things and helping the locals.
I did see that they donated a lot right back in April, which seems like a lifetime ago now. I was looking into kind of what the drinks industry had done and how they were helping with COVID and what they were sort of contributing to it. And there was a lot of distilleries making hand sanitizer and things like that, but it was, Diplomatico, which are now a global brand. You can see they donated an awful lot of their alcohol to make hand sanitizer. So it's always good to see as well. Like, you get obviously the small distilleries going, oh yeah, I want to help, but also the big distilleries as well, and in markets kind of going for big things. And I believe they make a gin as well, not under the Diplomatico brand, do they?
Yeah, it's under the distillery Dusa, which it changed name when the family took over in 2002. They've got an old gin still, so it's like a 500-litre tiny little gin still. So they started a project with quite a famed, quite well-renowned sort of Italian bartender called Simone.
Yeah.
He went to visit the Amazon, and he's looking at all the different fruits and started working with the local communities that live in the Amazon. And they wanted to make an Amazonian spirit, but it doesn't really bring off the bat. Like, they didn't know where to put it, so they made a gin.
Yeah.
The local communities harvest the different fruits. They kind of give what they can at different times of year. All of the POS comes from like native families from the Amazon as well. And then all of the charity, it's like 10% of all sales and all sort of, all profits go back into sort of charities, local charities. When we do they plant a lot of like trees. So a lot of bars and sort of independent retailers have sort of taken, when they've bought some, they've got a tree planted for them with a little geotag in the Amazon. So they're trying to give back and work on sort of nice little projects like that.
Yeah, it's good to see, because it has become a popular brand, and you mentioned obviously about the Resex, as that gets bigger and goes into more markets and bigger sort of plans. It's good to see that there is that commitment to sustainability and giving back to the community involved in it as well. But so
and they're genuinely a lovely family as well. I've met both the Jose's over Zoom chats, and
they both seem like, that's good.
Like they did, for example, some bartenders that had been to visit in previous over the years, they did a live tasting with the Jose's, one in Spain, one in Venezuela, and they sent them all a bottle. And they were just chatting, and then one guy was like, "Are you not going to tell us all about this rum?" He was like, "Oh, we sent it to you to drink with you. We're not going to give you the hard sell." And it was like, "Yeah, we're here to enjoy a chat for an hour." I was like, "Oh, amazing!" It's not kind of a sales technique. It was just let's have a drink together.
Interesting. There's a few producers we have that are a little bit like that. We've got an Italian wine, a natural Italian natural wine importer who is very much like that, and will kind of give you say, try it, see what you think, and you have a conversation about something completely different whilst drinking it, which it's always a good way to have alcohol. It's always good.
It's actually one of the bartenders was like, "Are you going to tell us what we're drinking then?" He was like, "Oh, I completely forgot." So, how are we doing? Pull yourself a tartar dram. It's quite refreshing.
Nice.
Very emotive.
So if anyone has any other questions, do let us know. But I think we've come to the end of it now, and I can see that favourites have sort of split a little bit, but I'm guessing I'm leaning mainly towards the Famille and the 2000 vintage, which is good. So it looks like
it's always good to see the new kid getting some love.
Looks like we might have to put an order in, or we'll be putting an order in with Sam for some more stock of that before Christmas, which I'm sure will make him happy. The 2005 is a limited release though, so if you are after that, do let us know, and we can perhaps sort something out. But stock wise, we probably haven't got as much of that as we do the others. But yeah, it's been really interesting, been really nice to sort of taste through the range as well, and it's always really helpful for not only myself, but for everybody that joins onto it, because as I say, at the moment we can't do the samples that we usually would, which is a shame, because it does really help sell something, and it is I can go on about something about how much I love it, and then somebody try it and be like, "Well, that's all right, it's not my favorite." All right, okay, so which is obviously difficult at the moment, but it's great that we can do these sort of tastings, and get everyone to try these and see what they think of them. So
No, thanks for having me on. It's been an enjoyable Thursday.
Nice.
I'm going to sit down and finish my 2005.
I've got a tiny little bit left of it. But as I say, most of it went out to everybody on the tasting. So you guys got all the good job. I've still got a little bit. It's fine. Not bitter at all. Yeah. No, it's been lovely and nice to chat to you, Dean, as well. Nice to sort of see you, and hopefully, we'll in the future we'll be able to have more in-person tastings again. Cause I think that is.
Look forward to coming back to the shop when it's full.
Oh, that'd be lovely. I mean, as I say, there's a lot of stuff in it at the moment, which I'm like, where has this all come from? But it is coming up to Christmas, so I think that's kind of how things will end up looking. Yeah, it's really, really nice. So eventually we'll get you back in and we can go through some of your favourite bits and pieces in store.
Done.
Yeah.
Done.
Well, it's lovely to chat to you as well. Thank you everyone so much for joining. I hope you enjoyed it. If you do have any questions that you think of afterwards, or if you are watching at a later date and there's any questions, do let us know. I can always put them forward to Dean. We can, we can get them answered for you. So yeah, well, lovely. I'll leave everyone to it to enjoy the rest of their evening. The last week of lockdown, although we're going back into tier 3, so be fine. But yeah, it's nice to have you on, Dean, as well. So
yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks so much. Thank you, guys. Hope you enjoyed that as I did.
Yes, it was really nice. I enjoyed it a lot. Right, so good evening, everyone, and have a lovely rest of your night. Thank you, and thank you again, Dean, for joining us. Thank you for everyone for joining us, and we'll see you soon. We'll speak to you soon.
All right. See you later.
Bye. Thank you.